Welcome back. We got quite a few announcements, and I know we want to get right to the guest speaker and answer all of your questions. So may I have to the podium Diana Davis, who's going to introduce our guests, Angie Edwards, who's going to make a special announcement, Mac Aldridge with a couple of new words, and then Judge Nicholas as well, please.
You have a hook to tear me off the stage, right?
Yes.
Okay, good deal.
Mac.
Excellent. So this is going to be too long for a short announcement, unfortunately, so I'm going to have to cut it back because I have too many wonderful things to say about this mystery Kiwanian. I stole it, Laurie. We have a mystery Kiwanian. He joined the West Bradenton Kiwanis Club in 1975. He served in the West Bradenton Club from 1977 to 2005. He was a Kiwanian of the Year in '84. He was the secretary of the West Bradenton Club for 10 years. He was a distinguished president. And he was the Florida District Lieutenant Governor, and he was the Kiwanis International Foundation Lieutenant Governor, and he has a Hickson Fellow Award, and he had the Kiwanis International Legion of Honor. And there is so much more I could say, but we already know who that is, right? Bill Edwards, my wonderful husband. My reason for this today is to tell you about an experience that he had and that we had together. And I'm probably going to have a hard time not crying, but I will do my very best. So 3 years ago, he received a Father's Day card from one of his Key Club members. He had his own father, but he said, Mr. Edwards is the man that I wish could be everyone's father, because he's guided me to a place where I'm going to go to university and have all of the experience and professionalism because he has pushed me along the way. This last Saturday, we went to the first Bradenton Christian Key Club meeting, and we were not there for more than an hour and a half and left 10 minutes later and had an email from Josh Ingram, the new president, thanking Mr. Edwards for all that he did and just in that one meeting and everything that he has done over his lifetime in the community. Janine Amick, thank you very much for changing my life. I think you know what I'm going to say. About a month ago, we were getting ready to do some retirement plans. No, Marty Garcia, my business partner, did not know that. But we were working on retirement plans. And Janine gave a call to Bill and asked him if he would further himself along on the board and in 2017 become the vice president, working towards president one day. How does a wife say no to a man with all those accomplishments? She doesn't. So I am so proud and so happy and humbled, not only to be the wife of this great man, but to be in this club with all of you people that give yourself every single solitary day to this community. I had no idea, and now I do. Thank you for having me and having me be part of this great club. And thank you for letting me be your wife. And thank you, Janine. And this is $60 happy for Bradenton Kiwanis for Mr. Grantham.
You definitely married up.
With that, I'm going to bring up Judge Nicholas, which can tag right into that about the importance of participation.
Well, that's a hard act to follow. Good afternoon. As I expected as a result of the Next Gen article, we've had a great deal of interest this coming year in sponsoring more K-Kids clubs. We picked up 3 additional clubs for the upcoming year, which brings us up to 9, which is awesome. Just think of all the good and wonderful things that these kids are going to be doing in their elementary schools, all the positive impact that they're going to have in this community. They're going to move on to Builders Club, Key Clubs, and imagine the world, what Manatee County is going to look like when we have an entire generation of elementary school students looking after one another and giving back. The challenge is it's going to be very difficult for me to to advise 9 separate clubs. I've kind of managed with 4. 6 last year was difficult, but 9 is beyond my ability. So I do need some help this coming year. It's not an enormous commitment, and believe me, you get back way more than you give. You just have to show up occasionally at the school, keep them energized, keep them from wanting to build habitat houses, keep the projects. Keep the projects small and local and within the school. But believe me, it's a wonderful, wonderful way to give back, and these kids are amazing, and I've enjoyed every minute of it. So if you're interested in helping out with K-Kids going forward, by all means, let me know. Thank you.
Now it's my great pleasure to bring up Heather, who's going to introduce our guest speaker today.
Thank you, Janine. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Heather Doyle. I am the president-elect of the Bradenton Kiwanis Club. It is with great pleasure that I introduce to you Senator Greg Steube. Senator Steube proudly serves District 23 in the Florida Senate. District 23 includes parts of the counties of Sarasota and Charlotte. As a native Floridian, Senator Steube is proud to have been born and raised in the Sarasota and Bradenton area. Senator Steube attended the University of Florida, where he was inducted into the University of Florida Hall of Fame as an undergraduate for his leadership accomplishments, and earned a BS degree with honors in animal science with a minor in agricultural law. Following his undergraduate studies, the senator attended UF's Levin College of Law and earned his Juris Doctor in 2003. I went to Stetson. I will not hold that against you. We'll talk later. After September 11th, Senator Steube enlisted in the U.S. Army and spent 1 year in the infantry and 3 years in the U.S. Army JAG Corps as a criminal trial counsel, chief of detainee operations, legal assistance attorney, and administrative law attorney. He serves as a captain with the 25th Infantry Division during Operation Iraqi Freedom and was deployed to Iraq from 2006 to 2007. He has received numerous awards and commendations for his service to our country. I'm sure if we said them all, we would be here much, much longer. Senator Steube owns and operates his own law practice, Legal Strategies and Consulting. Legal strategies and consulting can handle a wide array of legal and consulting issues, from real estate litigation to federal and local government consultation. Senator Steube was elected to the Florida Senate in 2016. Currently, Senator Steube is the chairman of the Judiciary Committee and the vice chairman of Banking and Insurance. He also serves on the Agriculture Committee, Appropriations Subcommittee on Finance and Tax, the Regulated Industries Committee, and the Joint Public Counsel Oversight Committee. Would someone please get me a glass of water? Previously, Senator Steube served, I wish I had all these things. Previously, Senator Steube served in the Florida House of Representatives for 6 years. Most importantly, Greg lives in Sarasota with his brilliant wife, Jennifer, and he has a 6-year-old son named Ethan. Ethan, give a shout out. Give a wave, Ethan. Woohoo, Ethan! Ethan, you're a VIP. All right, please give a warm Kiwanis welcome to Senator Greg Steube.
Thanks, Heather. And it's great to be back in Manatee County and see so many old and familiar faces that I haven't seen in such a long time. It's weird having gone from representing East Manatee and East Sarasota County for 6 years in the legislature growing up here, and then moving to a district. A lot of people actually still think that I represent a part of Manatee County, and I don't anymore. My district is the whole county of Sarasota and the western portion of Charlotte County. So it's nice to get up here occasionally and visit with my Manatee brethren. Mom and Dad say hi, so I'll just go ahead and say that now so that everybody doesn't ask me. They're doing great. Dad's enjoying his retirement. He spends his time mowing the lawn on his new tractor that he got in retirement and spending time with the grandkids when they're in town. And he moved right next to my brother, so it's walking distance between the other set of grandchildren from my brother's house to their house. So they're enjoying their retirement and spending time with their grandkids. So I just want to kind of give you an update of kind of where we are in the legislature, and then I'll just tell you what I've been working on, and I would love to hear from you. If there are specific questions you have prospectively, like what we might be working on in the next year as we're getting ready to ramp up, and then anything you want to ask that we've done this past legislative session. As you saw, I know all of you read the paper, last session was probably one, certainly I had never experienced the types of things that went on in my 7 years, now going on 8 years there. And I think next year is going to be interesting too, because we have a lot of people who are very large players in the legislative process. Senator Latvala, who's chair of appropriations, who's running for governor. The speaker is basically running for governor, although he hasn't announced. Then you have a governor who's likely running for the U.S. Senate. So you're going to have a lot of posturing on a lot of different issues. So it'll be interesting to see what gets filed and what doesn't get filed and how things move through the process. So let me kind of tell you where we're at. And Janine asked me to ask who was packing heat. That's what she wanted me to ask. How many of you are packing heat? But I won't do that. But that's what Janine wanted me to ask you. But right now where we are in the process, we just got done with session. We had a special session on the budget. And then in September, we have our first committee weeks. We actually have, I think it's 5 or 7 committee weeks before we go into full session. So the bulk of the work that I do on the front end, like right now, and I've got my list up here on my phone to kind of tell you some of the bills I've already filed. Now is the time for us, at least the way I view our job in the process, is to start working on bills and filing bills. Because our first committees start in September. And as Heather told you in my intro, I chair the Judiciary Committee. So as members start filing bills, which will be between now and January, but you want to be on the front end of that because you only have 5 committee weeks. So if you file a bill, like one of the bills I've already filed is alternative treatment options for veterans, and I can tell you a little bit about that. But that bill likely will get referred to 3 or 4 committees. So if I don't get that bill filed, and then it takes a couple of weeks for it to get referred by the president's office, and you're wanting and hoping that the House member on the other side is doing the same thing, then it's going to get referred to 3 or 4 committees. It's at least my goal as a member to try to get that bill through as many committees as you can during the committee work process before session starts. Because once session starts, the subcommittees and the smaller committees actually stop meeting by about the 4th week. Your bigger committees, like I chair Judiciary, it's one of the biggest policy committees, will meet till like week 7 or 8, depending on what's going on, usually till week 7. But if you don't have that bill through at least 1 or 2 committees by the time session starts, it becomes very, very challenging to get that bill heard in a committee during session because there's just so many bills getting floated around and there's so many issues happening. So now is the time. So if you have bill ideas or things that you think we should be working on, now's the time to reach out to your senators and your House members about what those issues are, because we're currently going through the drafting process. My aide sent me a spreadsheet. We're at like about 30 bills that I'm thinking about filing. I've got about 8 or 9 that are filed right now that I worked on last year. So now's the time that we're kind of focused on that so we can work strong going into the committee work week, and then that way we're in a good posture going into session. I actually, and you don't, no offense to the Bradenton Herald reporter that is here, but you won't read about this in the paper. I actually filed 72 bills last year, but I passed more bills than any other member of the legislature. I actually passed 15 bills last year. The press likes to talk about the more controversial things that I work on, like guns and pro-life type issues, but I actually passed 15 bills last year, a whole smattering of different things. So I'll continue to work on a wide array of different issues, and let me just briefly kind of tell you what I've filed already. So as Heather told you, I'm a vet, spent some time overseas, and we have guys that have experienced PTSD or TBI, so post-traumatic brain injury or traumatic brain injury, and there's alternative treatments for these guys that aren't typically medically recognized. So for example, an individual who I met with who had TBI, he had an IED hit him in his Humvee when he was in Iraq. He does music therapy, and it's not listening to music on a headphone, it's actually different tones. And there's people who do just music therapy, there's actually different tones that they hear in the microphone or in the headphones, and he doesn't have the tremors. He doesn't have the nightmares anymore because of this treatment. So one of the bills that I pushed is recognizing that there are other alternative treatments for these veterans that are working to help them get back on their feet and get a job. So that's one bill I'm working on. Last year I had a high school student in Riverview High School come to me with a great idea. I filed the bill, we moved it a little bit, but she thought, this is a high school senior, she just graduated, who came up with the idea. She's like, we have to go through sex education in high school class, but there's nothing about the warning signs of sexual trafficking and human trafficking that we're taught. And as you've probably read in the papers, there is a lot of human trafficking cases going on in Florida. And you don't see it, you don't hear about it except in the paper, but it's going on. And the numbers are pretty staggering when you actually start researching those issues. And she came up with a great idea. She's like, why don't they teach us warning signs to look for if students are being trafficked, or if students are getting pushed into schools to identify other students that might be enlisted into trafficking with these different individuals. So we filed that bill last year. We moved it a little bit. So I filed that again to require that our school districts incorporate, when they do their sex education, the signs and what to look for as it relates to sexual trafficking in our state. I thought that was a great idea, pretty mature for a high school senior. She drafted the bill, came to my office, came up with the idea, and we moved that through. So we'll move that through next year too. There's some things I worked on as it relates to health insurance companies and what's called prior authorizations and retroactive denials. And I'm sure many of you have experienced this. So you get authorization, or your doctor gets authorization to do some type of procedure, and then the insurance company, after you've gotten authorization, comes back and says, oh, no, we're not going to pay for that. So either the doctor's on the hook for that, or you as a patient are on the hook for that. So I filed a bill, it passed the entire Senate unanimously. It got stuck in a House committee last year that would not allow health insurance companies to retroactively deny claims, and that completely streamlined the prior authorization system so that insurance companies, once you've given authorization either to you as the patient or the provider, the medical doctor, they can't go back and deny and say, oh, no, we're not going to pay for that. Had great support from all the different groups of the medical community through the Senate. It passed unanimously through the Senate, and we got stuck in a House committee on the other side, because obviously health insurance companies don't like that bill because we're telling them that they can't deny claims. So those are some other things that I've been working on as it relates to health insurance. There's a bill that I filed for this coming session on driver's license. Any of you that are veterans know, and this was a bill I co-sponsored 4 or 5 years ago, that now you can go, and when you get your DL or you renew for your DL, you can get a little V designation on your driver's license card. So what I required in a bill a couple of years ago is they have to ask you specific questions. Well, they charge a fee for that. So if you want to be an organ donor in the state of Florida and they put the little emblem on your driver's license, you don't have to pay for that. But if you're a veteran and you want the V designation on your driver's license so that the Veterans Administration has your information, you have to pay a fee for that. Now, it's not a lot of money. It's like $8 or $10. But for a disabled vet, a World War II vet, a Korea vet who's on a fixed income, that's money to him. So I filed a bill to streamline that process and not require that veterans have to pay for that V designation on their driver's license card. Campaign finance is a bill that I already have filed, and I saw it alive and well in my race. When I ran for the Senate, I had the most expensive contested primary race in the state. Anybody have any idea how much money was spent just in my primary from all of the candidates combined? Throw a number out there. Anyone? Wow, who said $5 million? You're right. $5 million was spent just on my primary between all of the different political committees, all of the different campaigns, and only about 1.4 of that was either my campaign or PCs on behalf of me that were supporting me. All the rest of that money gets shoveled around political committees. So you've probably seen it. Did any of you live in Sarasota, or all of you live in Manatee? We got one little hand that was like, I can't really say. But I'm sure you've seen it in other races. You get these little fancy glossy mail pieces in the mail, and you flip them over and they say paid for political advertisement, the PC for blah, blah, blah. I've never heard it. People for Common Sense, or Veterans for America, or my political committee's name is Coalition for Conservative Leadership. Well, you don't know who the heck that is. Now, you can go and look that up on the Division of Elections website, but it doesn't say that that's tied to Greg Steube, because any person, any citizen in the state of Florida, any business in the state of Florida can start a political committee. So what ends up happening is, in order to hide where the money is being funneled so that one of your opponents doesn't have to put his name on the fact that he's attacking you for something that, one, is false, and two, there's no factual basis to support, which I know it's hard to believe, but that happens in politics. So what people do is you have PCA. So my political committee is called Coalition for Conservative Leadership. Let's say you want to give me $1 million to go after my opponent. So he gives me $1 million, or better yet, we start a new PC, because you can all go online right now and start a new political committee today, as we sit here today. Open up a bank account, because you get an EIN, and then open up the bank account. So you funnel $500,000 into that PC, and then you open 3 more PCs. Random names. You put some money in there, and then you have all these different people who are supporting your opponent or vice versa, putting money in all these different political committees, and then they move the money around. So it's like, I call it bona fide, legit, legal money laundering for campaigns, because you can put money in all these different political committees and then move the money around in an effort to, what? Disguise where the money's coming from. So if Walt Disney World wants to do an attack piece on Senator Steube, well, they put it in PC1, and then PC1 has $2 million in it, and they only put $200,000 in it. So then they move that $200,000 a couple weeks later, so you can't directly see that they did it like the same day, to another political committee that has another $3 or $4 million in it, and then they move it to 3 other political committees. So you've completely, there's no accountability at all to where this money's coming from. It can be coming from out of state, it can be coming from private people, it can be coming from your opponents on other sides. So the bill that I filed, and it didn't get heard in the Senate last year, but I'm going to work on that, and we moved it a little bit in the House, was not to disavow PCs. Originally, that's what I wanted to start with, because that would completely clean the process up. But not allow the political committees to transfer money. So if you, my opponent, you want to attack me on something, fine. But you have to attack me from the political committee that you raised the dollars in. Because when you, Greg Steube, have to put your name as paid for, approved by the political committee, now you're going to make sure that that's factually accurate, because if you attack me on something and the press sees that mail piece and they call you and say, well, you're attacking Senator Steube on blah, 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 yet there's no factual basis to support that. You're not going to do that. It would cut half the money out of all these campaigns, because you wouldn't be able to hide where the money's coming from, who's spending the money on what, and who's attacking who. So I'm hopeful that we can get this, especially in a campaign year as we go into 2018, because in my opinion, that is what drives up the cost of all these races. And I think you as the voter should know, when you get a glossy mail piece in the mail, who's actually behind that mail piece. And then the ability to be able to have some justification to say, okay, well, that's not factually accurate, and there's some accountability there. So I'll continue to work on that as we go into next year. How much time do I got, Janine? 10 minutes. 10 minutes? Would you rather I can talk forever about all these different bills. Do you guys, you want me to open up for questions now, or? No, 5 minutes and then open. Okay, so we'll do 2 more bills that I'm working on right now. Okay. So one of the bills I worked on last year got 2 committee stops, moved through the House a couple of times, which I think I have some assurances from leadership that this is going to move this coming year, is a bill to repeal the tobacco settlement agreement language in the statutes. Some of the lawyers may know what that is, but just to tell you kind of briefly what that is, tobacco companies in our state are the only businesses in the entire state of Florida that are protected and actually incentivized to delay cases and delay payments on judgments that have been made in suits where a jury has said, yes, tobacco company is liable for whatever occurred. It's from the Engel progeny of cases, but if, let's say CSX Railroad, their railroad goes off the track and kills a whole bunch of people, and those whole bunch of people start a class action lawsuit against CSX. In the bond statute in the state of Florida, all private businesses are held to the bond statute in Florida, except one business entity, tobacco companies. So my example, so if that happens with a railroad in CSX, they have, I believe it's $10 million for one. If it's one individual, if it's a class action, they're capped at $50 million. So they cap the bond amount. If it's a tobacco case, the caps are lower depending on how many people are in the class. So instead of paying $10 million, they pay $5. Instead of paying $50 million, they pay $10. So it protects the tobacco companies from having to pay all of these large jury awards that they get. And it allows them to continue to stay the case and not have to pay anything. So there are cases, and I can give you all the cases, where people have actually died and had a jury award in their favor 8 years ago, have actually died waiting to get paid out on the jury verdict awards because the tobacco companies don't pay. To even the further point, they're supposed to be paying the state of Florida. Attorney General last year, while this bill was going on, had to sue the tobacco companies because they weren't paying the judgments that a court in our and our state has said that they owe. So if you do away with the bond repeal statute that's specific for them and treat them just as any other business, then they would have to start being forced to pay some of these awards that are being paid out. So that's one of the bills that I have. And then I can talk briefly about two of the concealed carry bills that I filed for this coming session because it's already filed. One is the courthouse carry bill. It would allow you as a concealed license permit holder to carry your concealed firearm from your vehicle, because you can carry out in front of the courthouse, to the courthouse. You surrender that firearm to court personnel. They would secure it however they want to secure it while you're at the courthouse. And then when you leave the courthouse, you can get your secured firearm back. Let me tell you why this is important on a couple of different levels. If you're an attorney, or you're a prosecutor, or you're a defense attorney, and you deal with criminals and you deal with people who want to hurt you, if you have to go to court, and guess what? Anytime I go to court for a hearing, it's public because I have to set a notice for hearing. So you know when I'm going into the courthouse and when I'm coming out of the courthouse. So any one of these individuals who have a license to carry and have a valid concealed carry permit, what do they have to do with their weapon while they go to the courthouse? They have to leave it in their car. I just had a meeting with the chief of police in Sarasota. They had 44, just last year, they had 44 vehicles have firearms stolen out of the vehicles while they were just sitting in Sarasota, in the city of Sarasota. So one issue is you have guns sitting in a car unattended, and two, you have issues of people like myself who have the training and requisite background to protect myself and feel like I feel comfortable protecting myself, that I shouldn't have to surrender my firearm in my vehicle and leave it in my vehicle while I go to a court hearing where everybody knows I'm going to be and everybody knows I'm going to be coming out. So that's one of the bills that we passed. That bill actually passed the entire Senate floor last year. I didn't have a House sponsor, but I have a House sponsor this year, so I'm hopeful that we can get that done this coming session so that people that have a valid concealed carry permit would be able to carry their firearm to the courthouse, surrender it to law enforcement, and get it back. And let me just say something real quick, too, because this gets lost a lot of times when I'm talking to the press and things get out in the paper. I'm so adamant about these issues because the facts support nothing other than allowing law-abiding citizens who have a concealed carry permit to defend themselves. How many people in here, and raise your hand, how many people in here are comfortable with my father or my brother or any certified law enforcement officer who is wearing a uniform and has a badge and carries a gun? How many of you are comfortable with that individual carrying a gun? Everybody in the room. Of course you are. Would you like to know that licensed concealed permit carrier holders, and we've had concealed carry in the state of Florida for 28 years, and in those 28 years, if you look at the data, I, as a licensed permit holder, and if my dad was standing here, because I like to give him a hard time about this, if he was standing here, I'm 10 times less likely to commit a crime than a certified law enforcement officer. You can pull that information from the Department of Ag and Consumer Services, from the Florida Department of Law Enforcement. So statistically, if a licensed permit holder like myself am 10 times less likely to commit a crime than a uniformed sheriff deputy, why would you deny my right to carry and protect myself? Give me one factual basis as a reason to do that, and there is none, which is why I will continue to fight for a lot of these issues. One of the other bills that I've also filed that I don't think I filed it yet, but it's coming. It's my old SB 646 from last year, which is the open carry fix. It does not allow open carry in the state of Florida, despite what you will read in the press. It does not allow you to openly carry in the state of Florida. What the bill does is it fixes the open carry statute because of a case called the Dale Norman case. And what that does is the way that the Florida Supreme Court in the Dale Norman case defined briefly and incidentally displaying your firearm, so the facts of that case was the guy was driving down the road, I think on a motorcycle, or he was walking down the road, and he was on a motorcycle, and his shirt got caught behind his gun. He had a valid concealed carry permit, was not doing anything unlawful at the time. What do you think happened? Somebody called the police. Somebody came up on him, and instead of just, if it was probably Manatee County, this would have happened. Somebody would have walked up to him and said, hey, Mr. Norman, hey, your gun's showing. Hey, can I see a permit and make sure that you can legally, lawfully conceal carry? Oh, sure. Well, that's not what happened. 4 police cars come running up. They put him down on the ground. They arrest him, despite the fact that he had a valid concealed carry permit. The case got appealed all the way up to the Florida Supreme Court, and the Florida Supreme Court defined briefly as basically being, that's briefly. So what we're trying to do is change the word briefly to the word temporary. So when Senator Steube goes back to his car down here and gets in my car and leaves, and I take my jacket off to get into my vehicle, I can't be charged with a felony for openly displaying my firearm. That's what we're trying to fix. We're trying to fix an incident in Florida where It's very difficult if I reach up in Publix up high and you see my firearm, I can be cited with unlawfully openly displaying my firearm. So that's what we're trying to fix, because I don't think law-abiding citizens who are not committing a crime should be charged with a crime just because somebody sees them display their firearm in an unintentional manner. So those are some of the things that I'm working on, and questions. Yes, sir.
What Governor Scott is trying to pass as a bill to the Constitution, is that what the Tiger Bay Club is going to also talk about? Constitutional amendment?
For the tax increase?
Tax increases, you guys can't, or nobody can increase taxes.
So the question, I have to repeat it for the folks back, or the however many people that may watch this on rerun when it gets, all what? Oh, all of them, yeah. So the question was the constitutional amendment that the governor is wanting to propose, that it'd be harder for us to increase taxes. I think they're going two routes. The legislature can do that. It takes 2/3. And to get a constitutional amendment passed, you file it like a normal bill. It takes 2/3 in each chamber, and then that bill, if signed by the governor, would be placed on the ballot for you to vote on it as a citizen. Or, because we're doing CRC, which only happens once every 20 years, it's a very historic thing in Florida, where that committee has unilateral authority. There's only 37 of them, I think, 36, 37. Unilateral authority to come up with any idea they want to come up with. And if a majority of that the CRC decides to put it on the ballot, it goes direct to the voters, straight on the ballot. The governor doesn't have veto authority. The legislature doesn't have any override authority. Whatever that 36, 37 people decide upon will go straight on the ballot. So what they're also talking about doing is having the CRC do that as one of their amendments that they propose putting on the ballot. So it could happen two different ways, but I can guarantee you, because I saw this morning some of the things that the speaker said on it. So I bet you'll see a bill in the legislature for that too.
Why would you want to make sure that, I mean, that's crazy. I mean, 10 years ago, you could buy a brand new Ford for $14,000, and now they're...
Yeah, vote against the amendment if that's how you feel, if it ends up going through the process. I would be willing to bet you'll see it both in the CRC and in the legislature. And so if it does pass, now it's going to take 2/3. The Republican majority doesn't have 2/3 in the Senate. We have 25 out of 40 members. There's actually a special election going on right now that is in a very swing district, if you will, that could change that to either 26 or 24. No, because we actually have 24, so technically we only have 24 right now. That 25th senator is the one that's up for a guy resigned, and we have somebody running right now. So to get 2/3 in the Senate is a much more challenging escapade than in the House. In the House, there's 81 or 79 members out of 120 Republicans, and it's a very different. People ask me all the time, what's the big difference between the House and the Senate? One, I can file as many bills as I want, and two, the dynamics are very, very different, because you're dealing with 25 Republican majority, 21 votes to get anything done, and in the House side, it's 61 votes, but the Republicans alone have 80 of those votes. So even if 10 or 15 Republicans in the House peel off and don't vote for that, you still can get to that number very easily. You can't in the Senate. And that's why every senator in the Senate makes a huge difference, because even if you're not on the committees that impact that policy, you can have a huge impact, because at the end of the day, there's only 40 of you, and you need 21 votes to get anything done. I can tell you how many committees I sit on. Like the Ag Committee I sit on has 5 members. That's it. There's only 5 members that sit on that committee. Insurance and Banking, 7. My Judiciary Committee, 9. So you only need like 5, 4, 3. If you're in a 5-member committee, you only need 3 votes. But if you're one of the 3 majority and you peel off, suddenly the bill's dead. That's why it's just much more difficult to get policy through the Senate, especially stuff that can be controversial, just because of the rare number, or the bare numbers. That was a long-winded answer to your question. I apologize, but yes, sir.
When are we going to give Florida State Troopers a salary that takes them above the 49th lowest paid
Yep.
law enforcement officers?
I've been trying to do that for years, and the approach we gave them, we gave them a 5% increase this past year, which still wholly underfunded in my opinion. What I intend on doing, now the challenge is you don't really file a bill because it's a budget item, but I'm looking at filing a bill. Georgia starts their troopers off at I think 52, is what they start their troopers off at. So it's my intent to bring our troopers up to the exact same level as the other surrounding southern states. And I mean, having obviously a family in law enforcement, I heard from Dad all the time, the troopers would go and get trained by the Troopers Academy, spend a couple of years on the troop, and then they would get picked off by Dad or Sarasota sheriffs, or the same thing happened to him with his department. He wasn't getting the type of raises he needed to keep his guys competitively paid. So Sarasota sheriffs pays more, so they were plucking people. Tampa PD pays more. So if you are a cop and you can get paid more to go to Tampa PD versus Manatee Sheriffs, what are you going to do? You're going to move. So they lose a lot of people. And I 100% agree with you that and frankly mental health funding in the state of Florida needs to be brought up to commensurate levels as a country, because our troopers go out there every day and risk their lives. And one of the things I also have read up on lately is the average response time to just minor incidents is like 3.5 hours. So try not to get in a minor traffic accident, because you'll be waiting there for about 3.5 hours. And that's because they're understaffed and they're underpaid and they can't get to a lot of these things. The appropriations chair in the Senate has said he's going to make it a big priority to give them a raise, and I think that's something that you'll see done this year. We gave them 5% last year, but I think we should need to keep doing it until they get to the same level. Yes, ma'am.
Quickly, Senator, going back to the tobacco company, what happens to the unfortunate person who got the award from the tobacco company and dies before it's awarded? What happens to the funds?
The tobacco company doesn't have to pay it, or the estate, I guess, could make a claim in the estate process, and then you have more lawyers litigating that piece of it. But that's their whole intent is, well, let's say it's just a single person that with no heirs, then the tobacco company just doesn't have to pay it out, which is why, and if you read the statute, I think it's 560 something. I can get it to you if you want to look at it. But if you read it, it actually incentivizes the tobacco companies to appeal, to do all of these things to delay the outcome of the jury award. And this is post-trial. This isn't like mediation. This isn't pre-trial. We're going to agree upon an amount. This is, you went to trial. You had a trial. The jury of your peers said, yes, this person has been injured, and this is how much money they're owed. And the judge has said, yes. So you're like post all of that. And they're still trying to delay it for as long as possible, because if, like you said, if the health of the person is bad, they're going to die before the tobacco company would have to pay it out. It's really sad. If you Google some of this stuff, the stuff that's out there that has been done is really disappointing. Any other questions? I got 3 minutes. No more questions? Oh, one quick one.
All right, go ahead.
Sure, I can tell you a little bit about that. So I came post his capture, and actually I was with the 25th Infantry Division in MND North, which is, if you look at the country of Iraq, kind of draw a little circle around Baghdad, everything north of Baghdad from the Iranian border, the Turkish border, and the Syrian border was MND North. And so I had that whole area of operation. Well, where I was based with the 25th was Tikrit. Well, Tikrit was Saddam's hometown. So I came, the 101st is who actually captured him, and the 101st Airborne Infantry Division and the 25th rotated in and out. So when I rotated in as the chief of detainee ops, so I was obviously involved in all of those things, he actually was tried, convicted, and executed while I was there. And kind of a funny story. I don't think I've ever told this in public.
Not a good choice of words.
Well, it's an interesting story. I was there when he was executed, and I'm trying to make sure I don't say anything that's classified or not been declassified, but they took his body from, where the execution was in Baghdad, and because they brought him back to family. And so his body was actually flown in to Tikrit, where I was stationed, and I was involved in some of the maneuvering to make sure that it wasn't very obvious where he was, but his body was handed over to his family in an unmarked convoy, and he was buried somewhere near around his hometown. But on the day that he was executed, we, as the commanding division that were there, were obviously very concerned of a lot of reprisals. So every unit at least in our division in the north, was pulled back in. Like, nobody was doing missions. It was just eerily quiet that couple of days. But all of our units were in base to make sure that, and it was just Nothing happened. It was very quiet. The exchange happened very quietly. I was there during some of the conviction, post-conviction, and then when he was executed, because I got there August of 2006, and that happened during my time there. But it is kind of an interesting event, having been there and witnessed what occurred and seen after they brought him and brought his body back and then delivered it to family. We thought that was going to be a huge issue, but they did it in a way that you couldn't identify the vehicles that went out, and it didn't look like a big caravan or convoy, and then they released him to his family, and that was it.
All right. Round of applause for
Thank you.
Senator Steube. Stay right here. Stay. And then I'm going to ask his lovely wife, Jen, to join him, because we know being in government, it's not just the gentleman or woman at the podium speaking, but it's the pressure behind to make sure everything gets done. And so I love to say that because I can. And so we appreciate it. Jen, this Kiwanis Golden Ruler is to measure the future success of your family as it grows and serves our country together as one unit. So thank you very much also. All right. If you'd like to harass Senator Steube, he will stay around for a couple of more questions off camera and, of course, not in the paper. That's my words, not his, I promise. Also, reminder, Pier 22 board meeting tomorrow. Action up, follow-up report will be sent out by Brett in your email. Please send them back as soon as possible. Please search your hearts and search your date books. See if you are willing to commit just a little bit of time every month to helping Judge Nicholas out with the K kids. You can see the impact as those kids go from elementary school to middle school to high school. If you ever want a question, please ask Mr. Vita, ask Mr. Edwards how impacting you can be in kids who get all the way through into high school and then go beyond, and then being able to see them flourish into young men and women in this community. So with that, thank you for attending. We are adjourned.